Hey, it's Grady at Twin Creek Audio. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy 2025. Today I'm in the small bedroom studio again. I'm still working on setting up the big proper studio, but that's taking some time, and over the holidays, any work on that has kind of been put on hold. Today I'm going to share with you how I intend to record drums in this small bedroom studio. And on top of that, I'm going to actually record drums to tape with the Tascam MSR-16 here in this small bedroom. You're probably wondering how I'm going to do that, and I didn't put it in the title, but it might be in the video description if you cheated and looked there first. But I'm going to use a Roland electronic drum kit, and I'm going to use the MIDI connection on the Roland TD-9 drum module to connect to the MIDI input on the audio interface, and I can trigger drum samples in the DAW. Then in order to record those drum samples to tape, I'm going to take the outputs from the audio interface, run those through the Mackie 8-bus console so that I can record them to the Tascam MSR-16. It's kind of a weird way to go about doing that, but I thought it would be a fun experiment and give me a setup I can use here in the bedroom and still use some tape if I want to. I've also put a lot of time and effort into my tape machines, so I kind of want to use those. So this method, I'm not going to make a lot of noise, and I'm still going to be able to record some really good sounding drum samples onto analog tape, which will probably change the sound of those samples somewhat. So that's pretty cool. So the first thing I did was connect the MIDI output from the drum module to MIDI input on the audio interface. And then that talks to Reaper on the Mac Pro, and I have Slate drums, SSD, I think it's 5.5 Platinum is what I have on here. So I'm using the SSD 5 drum sampler here, and then I'm sending all of these out separate individual outputs. So I'm assigning those in here in the Slate interface. And then of course the actual tracks here, I have these assigned to separate outputs on the audio interface. Like that's output number 1, 2, 3 and 4, 3 and 4, 3 and 4, so all my toms are subgrouped and panned across 3 and 4. Cymbal track and the overhead track are both stereo, so I just have those assigned to the same pair of outputs on the audio interface. In this case it's 5 and 6. And then the room mic, I put rooms as mono track and send it to output number 7 on the interface. So that's a little confusing because these are panned straight up and down, but these are actually stereo cymbals and stereo overheads, so they're being sent to a pair of outputs. I didn't want to use so many tracks to do stereo rooms, so I only used 7 outputs to do this. And so I'm using the Roland drum module and the Roland V Drums kit to trigger samples. Then I'm sending those samples using the channels in Reaper, sending those samples to individual outputs on the audio interface. My interface right now only has 8 outputs, so I've connected those 8 outputs from the audio interface to line inputs on the Mackie 8-bus. I also have the Tascam MSR-16 connected to the subgroups and the tape inputs on the Mackie 8-bus. If you missed how I set that up, it's in the last video. I'll put a link to that video at the end of this video and in the video description. So here are all of my connections on the audio interface. This is input 3 and 4, and these are coming from the master outputs of the Mackie 8-bus. The other inputs right now don't have anything connected to them. These are the 8 outputs here. These go to an 8-channel snake so that I can send individual drum samples out some of these outputs and to the mixing console, and then to tape or whatever else I want to do with it. And of course over here I have a MIDI connection. This MIDI connection goes to the Roland TD-9 drum module so that I can use the electronic drum kit to trigger samples in the computer and then send the samples out of individual outputs to the mixer so that I can record them to tape or do other things with them. Yes, I did have to modify these. The plugs were too close together on this interface for these snakes. So I just kind of sanded those down to make them a little smaller on the edges where I could fit 2 together, because they were too big. You couldn't plug them into this. Here's the other end of the snake. So these come from the outputs on the audio interface, and then I've got those connected to line inputs here on the Mackie 8-bus recording console. And of course I've remembered to press the line switches here behind the line inputs So all these are set to line mode, and then I have my 8 individual audio interface outputs running here to these line inputs. Of course, I also have the tape outputs from the Tascam MSR-16 running over here, but those are going to the tape inputs on the console. So that way I can use the line inputs for the drum samples, and then I can use the tape returns to play tape back through. I can use the same set of channels for either. So now I have 8 outputs from the audio interface connected to line inputs here on the Mackie 8-bus recording console. So those signals with drum samples on them will come down these individual channel strips, and then I can use the assign switches here to send those to any of those 8 subgroup outputs. So those 8 subgroup outputs on the Mackie 8-bus come up here on the top row of this Patchbay, 1 through 8. And then, of course, the bottom row here on the Patchbay connects to the tape inputs on the Tascam MSR-16, which is sitting right here next to this rack. So that enables me to take anything on the console and assign it to one of these 8 subgroups, and then it will automatically go to any of the first 8 tracks. Of course, if I want to record 2 tracks 9 through 16, I don't have anything connected to this row yet. That'll be in a future video. But I can still patch from these 8 subgroup outputs over here to the inputs of the tape machine 9 through 16. Make sure to check out the last video where I connected the MSR-16 to the Mackie, because that will give a little more detail about how this is supposed to work. And also watch the next video, because I'm going to connect some more things to some of the empty patch points here on this Patchbay, like some of this outboard gear. I'm just going to be playing drum tracks live as if the samples were microphones on the drum kit. Since I'm recording to tape, there's not going to be a lot of editing involved, but this should be a decent setup for me to tinker around with and maybe write some things and demo some stuff here in the bedroom studio while I'm working on the big studio. That seems to work pretty well, and the Tascam MSR-16 with the dBx noise reduction sounds really good and adds a little bit of kind of compression sound to the recording. So it works really, really well. I'm really happy with that, as long as I can play drums accurately, since I'm actually tracking in real time onto tape, so that could be a challenge. But since this is mainly set up for demos and songwriting in this bedroom studio, I think this will be just fine. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to check out the next video where I do a more extensive test of this bedroom studio setup, as well as future videos on the new studio build. Thanks so much for watching. Everyone have a good nanosecond, good day, good year. Thanks for watching.